Right. They were looking for people who were dog whistling, basically. And they had decided because they went to my Twitter, they deep dived me on the internet. And they're like, oh, he follows X, Y, and Z on Twitter. He must be an alt-right person.
You are absolutely welcome. You are absolutely welcome. So, for the viewers at home who are going to be watching this back, my name is Carl. It's Mr. Random Single Player Carl on social media and Twitter. This is what I call the Amusement. It's going to be a series of videos that I'm going to be kicking off with our first guest today, mainly to get to know the artists that make the art of our current year, culture, Twitter culture, internet culture, and all things associated with it. To try and get to understand artists for who they are and the memes that they end up inspiring. And with me today, I have George Alexopoulos. You can know him as gprime85 on Twitter, Instagram, and Reddit, I believe.
Yes.
I think you also have a DeviantArt, but you don't have any deviations on there. Is that correct?
Man, it's been so long since I probably have one.
I
I use ArtStation now for my gallery,
okay,
which is just my name.
Okay. I will write that down.
Yeah. Man, I used to DeviantArt when I was even in high school. I think that was a thing, like back in the early 2000s.
I think all of my friends of high school age, either their art went on Twitter, or it went on DeviantArt, or it went on Tumblr before the purge.
Yeah, it's it's almost a shame because you don't want to put too many pieces onto a single platform, and then it ends up going bust, and then you have to re-upload everything, and it turns into this whole migration. And I had a comic up on Webtoon that I had to upload piece by piece. It was like 500 strips, and that took like a year and a half. It was funny because my readers thought I was drawing it in real time. Some of them, I felt so bad. Like, no, I actually don't draw this fast. It actually took 10 years.
Okay. That's actually a long time. 10 years.
Yeah, I had the one strip. Right now it's called Problematic. It turned 10 last year or a couple months ago. I can't remember.
That's
Somewhere around there.
That's quite an achievement.
Yeah, stubbornness. I don't mean to derail you. Please.
Oh no,
continue.
please. Oh, I don't mind. I don't think anybody else will mind either. But to roll into the first question, this is a question that I'm going to start with everybody. So don't feel like it's a target. What was your major in college?
Well, I am a dropout actually from art school, but I went for cartooning. I went for 1 year. Freshman year, I completed it, and then in the first month of my sophomore year, I left for various reasons.
Okay.
So yeah, it was going to be cartooning.
Do you feel comfortable going into any of those reasons?
Yeah, sure. It was multiple things. It was financial because at the time it was hyper expensive, and I didn't have any money that I could even have borrowed. So I had to use loans and stuff. I wasn't good enough for scholarships. I didn't know about them. And so A is money. B, I was a little annoyed by the curriculum because at the school I went to, they had a 4-year animation program where they just drop you in. There's no foundation year. And I was very annoyed by my cartooning foundation year, which involved subjects I wasn't interested in, like science, math, and all that stuff, which is fine. But I felt that if I'm going to be spending money, I'm a bad student. So that's the long story short is I dropped out because I felt that I could teach myself for free, which is what I ended up doing. And I don't know if it was for better or for worse, but I feel like if I finished my cartooning degree, the only thing that would have been valuable at the end was connections I would have made at school, which in the industry can be immensely valuable. But it's not the actual skills you learn because you can learn that stuff on your own. And that's generally I'm in the self-taught, what do you call it? That's where I lean. I try to if I ever teach someone how to draw, I want to try to encourage them to learn to teach themselves. But obviously, a school, college is all about like, hey, we want to get students, and that's how we make money. So
Okay.
it just didn't work out for me. But it's not to knock art school.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have similar experiences because I had gone into game development and game design in my
Oh, yeah.
town. Yeah, it's a very long story, but to cut it short, I was basically talked into it by my family members. My mother and my sister. When I told them like, "Hey, I want to go do this thing involving this stuff," and my sister's dead ass told me to my face, and to this day still does. Says, "I don't know if you're good enough for that little for that little bro." And my mom just like stood there and like, I could, but I just wanted to have a son who you go to architecture school, and it's like, well, what is it that you want? Do you want me to be here, or am I supposed to be something on your mantelpiece?
Mm. Yeah, man, it's hard, especially depending on what year it was.
Mm-hmm.
Game development was not an option as much for my age, but as time has gone on, game development is a huge industry now. So that's actually a prestigious job that you could go for nowadays.
You could say that basically the rise of people like Toby Fox, people who are both designers and also artists and also musicians on their own, that
Mhm.
to have a foot in any industry or multiple of those industries is to basically have a gateway to potentially having lucrative deals and ultimately friendships that pay for themselves if that's the way you wanted to go.
It's it changes so frequently that like even Toby Fox now, if you look at what how he got his foot in the door,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not even sure that door's open anymore. But the scene is changing so
Mm-hmm.
fast that having as many skills as possible, like I know how to 3D model, for instance, and animate, and I can code a little bit. So theoretically, someone like me could just put together a game by myself. Or if I have one friend who has all the skills that I don't, we could probably make a game together.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which I don't know how many since Super Meat Boy ish years. When was that? Late 2000s.
Yeah.
Before that, that wasn't even possible. Um, it's weird, but the career has changed so much in the past few years, and it's still changing. But there's no downside to having so many skills, aside from the amount of time it takes to learn it all, I
Mm-hmm.
guess. And of course, we have to have jobs in the meantime. So family pressure and stuff like that is a factor too.
Of course. Of course. Um, Another question I had for you is where are you from?
New Jersey,
Joyzy. Joyzy.
New Jersey, and of course I'm Greek, so that's the other side of that coin.
Did anything with your history or your life culture or your family have any influences on your art?
On my art,
Yes.
probably not. My family's not really artistic. I think I'm more Japan influenced than anything else,
Hmm.
but pop culture influenced. So of course I grew up with like Sailor Moon. Dragon Ball Z was just getting dubbed. I was a little kid in elementary school when those anime were starting to get imported into the states, and then as I became a teen, we had access to things like Ghost in the Shell, Akira, and that sort of thing, and video games, of course. So I would play a game like Final Fantasy VII when I was like 11 and or 12, and I thought that this was like literature. So I grew up drawing video game characters and comics, and later, as I grew older, I'm like, oh, I only like Japanese stuff for some reason. So I would say it was mostly Japan influenced, and then as I got older, I got into art history, and then I started, studying like European and American stuff, and so I started in the Japanese flavor, and then I sort of grew outward.
Mm.
But yeah, there wasn't a lot of Greek art that I can think of that I would really know. My family never got it. It's like, why are you always drawing monsters?
Mm.
And like Doom characters when I was a little kid. Yeah, I just like monsters. And they thought, I don't know if you have a story like this where it's like, why are you always drawing like people getting shot and like explosions? Is there something wrong with you? It's like, no, I just like action games. And yeah, they didn't. What I'm trying to say is they didn't really get it.
For me, if I had a story, it would probably be a day I was sitting inside of my 11th year writing class. I had the same writing and structure for both the sophomore, junior, and senior year, and she kept noticing it's that I had a recurring theme of women with black hair and ravens and also crows. And like, what is your obsession with this? Wait, why are you always talking about these things? Are you secretly goth, Carl? I'm like, no,
You have good taste.
I have yes,
That's
I
the
have
answer.
yes.
Yeah, I don't think kids can really all the psychoanalysis on kids is like that's just what I'm into, man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That's as deep as it goes.
And
I
also,
don't know if that's true.
maybe not.
I don't know, man. I like what I like. We all have our phases. It was funny when I was in high school and middle school. I was friends with the kids who would like dress up that way,
Mm-hmm,
but I never had the guts to.
mm-hmm.
So it's like I identified as a punk or whatever, goth, but I never had the guts to actually like get an ear pierced or something. So I would just draw monsters and be like, "Yeah, I have a secret.
Okay.
I'm dark."
Don't we all? Don't we all?
Oh man.
So tell me
I
about.
secretly, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I was like, please continue.
In middle school and high school, my big secret is like I'll listen to heavy metal and then Yanni at the same time.
Ooh, that's, that's an
Oh
interesting
my god.
mix.
I like music in general, but anyway, no, I just that's a funny joke, but it's true. I actually used to listen to Yanni in high school.
Huh. What sort of music do you listen to now?
Everything. It depends on my mood. Um, lately, since I'm currently working on a kind of a sad horror story, do you know Yoko Kano?
Yes.
I've been binging her library a lot. I listen to lots of video game soundtracks in general. I just discovered Tool. I've never heard any of their music. I've heard of them.
Mm,
Uh, I don't know. A little bit of everything. It really depends on what mood I'm in.
okay.
Sorry.
So yes,
Sidetrack.
it's okay. It's okay. So
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, can you tell me a bit about the series of events that eventually led you to realize that you had a passion for art as you do?
Man. You know, there were, it was a lifelong thing, but I think I started taking it seriously when I realized that once I get out of high school, it's like, what am I going to do with myself? So I had always been drawing stuff. When I was a little kid, I was always drawing video game characters and designing, trying to design video games and comics. And for me, I guess the connecting tissue is that I liked telling stories and reading stories. And then middle of high school, early high school, I started thinking like, wait, am I going to do something with this? Because I had giant legal folders full of comics that I would draw for myself and my friends at school, and I would, show it to them at lunch and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked down at this pile that I would draw instead of doing homework. I had bad grades because I would draw comics all day instead of homework, and I would skip class and like draw comics. And then I figured, well, I may as well do this, if nothing else. So yeah, by the time I started deciding like what college am I going to go to, I decided to go to an art college because I figured that's the thing I'm good at. And when I graduated high school, I was I think one of the two kids who had we took every art course there was in school, and we still wanted more. So I figured like that's my thing. And then I started taking it seriously when I left college, or dropped out, excuse me. And I was working at a video store, and I'm thinking like, is this going to be my life? Because I don't have a degree, and my family keeps pressuring me like, you got to get a degree, got to do something. I'm like, yeah, but I want to make comics. I want to make games. And they're like, yeah, but you can't. Nobody does that in real life. We don't know anybody who does that. I didn't know how to break in. And there was a company called Tokyo Pop, and they were dominant back in the day. And they had a contest called Rising Stars of Manga, and around their fifth volume, I think, was the one I applied to. I had a comic that I submitted a 20-page comic to, and I got selected as like third place or something. And they assigned me an editor, and they offered me, an opportunity to do a graphic novel with them, which I did. And that was my little debut, but unfortunately they went out of business
Mm-hmm.
like a year later, 2 years later. and so I was back. I don't know. I fell out of the comics industry, and I was doing indie comics the whole time afterwards, thinking like, I don't know, I have to make comics. It's just in my DNA, I guess. And I've been doing indie comics ever since. And uh, long story short, I've been working on indie games. I'm a freelancer.
Hmm.
So there was a point where I guess I realized I could do this full time, uh, not without a lot of effort, but I have been able to do it miraculously. Uh, I'm sorry for the long answer, but yeah.
No, it is every single bit is everything that I want to hear.
Yeah, it's there are a lot of creative types who will say it's like a cursed profession. Like the more you like doing it,
Hmm.
the less chances you have of making money sometimes. I don't know, but we're all trying. We're looking for ways in. And like we were saying with games, the comics industry is changing like every day. And well, we could talk about this later if you want, but like the Japanese wave of comics is like it's coming. It has been coming. Uh,
Hmm.
anyway, I think it's going to change the American comics market permanently, but we'll have to see.
If
But go on.
if we everything as I've been seeing it, as I've always been seeing it from that industry goes, especially with companies like Funimation getting committee seats at these studios about how they would like to influence the art. Oh, not only is
Yeah.
it coming, it's gonna flood like an X-ray impreg.
In what?
That is, those are Dojin terms. X
An X-ray?
X-ray impreg cream pie, basically, if you know what that is.
Uh, I'll probably I'll realize what you mean later.
Oh, you innocent
All right.
child.
No, no problem. I have a pure heart right now. I'm drinking coffee. I'm okay.
It's okay. It's okay.
All right.
Right. So, tell me, other than what you've already told me about your motivation, what inspires your current muse? Your motivation, your vision for drawing now.
Uh, well, the current project I'm working on is a black and white. Oh man, there's so it's a complex answer. Right now, I'm sort of trying to find my audience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm combining that with my interest in telling my first adults only story, in that it has adult themes, not just like the usual stuff you would assume.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm trying to find an audience online that is stable because I've been jumping from platform to platform, and it seems get I can't find a foothold. Like I can find an audience for a little while, and then I either, you know, for some reason or another, I'm sure you'll ask about this later, like
Mm-hmm. I.
that we just don't click, or something happens, or I can't earn a living at it, so I have to find some other way to earn a living. So being able to earn a living while drawing comics is the big problem right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I may not be able to do it for much longer actually, but that's my test right now with my current series.
I did notice that hopping around a bit. That was one of the things I was going to ask you later.
Yeah, it's the internet's a weird place.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, but we could talk about that later. But yeah, the current muse is like artistically, I'm telling a really nice story that's a little bit of horror, romance, action. It's black and white. It looks good. Um, and the cool thing is, I can print from home, which has been my little experiment lately. Where like a lot of indie creators, one of their biggest hurdles is finding a good printing service or
Mm-hmm.
something like that. But
Mm-hmm.
I have worked in the printing industry for so long, um, that I know how to make books, and so I had an Indiegogo with my last title, and I invested a whole bunch of that money into printing equipment, and so I have my black and white book here that I'm going to try to launch in a couple of weeks, and I'll see if that's profitable, and if it is, then I'll keep doing this, and if not, I got to find another job. I'll see what happens.
And how would you say that you developed your style over time? Just a lot of trial and error?
Yeah, I guess what it is you find a favorite artist and then you emulate them.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a kid, it was Toriyama and old Super Nintendo covers, Sonic. Uh, yeah, basically lots of Toriyama. And then when I got to a certain age and I started watching more anime, was like, oh, I like the way that guy draws their noses. I'm going to steal their nose. Or I like those eyes. I'm going to start using those eyes. And so as I was collecting favorite artists, I would borrow favorite things from this one, that one. Um, so it wasn't any single source, I guess, but yeah, based on what I would consume at the time. Oh, Tetsuya Nomura was huge when I was younger, but of course he was inspired by Toriyama too.
Hmm.
But yeah, like lots of Japanese stuff, anime, manga, games, and as I got older, I was more into European stuff, so like paintings, proper paintings, and I had a huge phase with this black and white artist called Gustave Doré, and uh, he does kind of like wood print etching sort of art, and I've been really in love with that. And lately, I've been studying Mobius, for example, so I want to steal like his clean art style, borrowing a little bit from everybody
Hmm.
because you don't want to copy styles, you want to sort of just be inspired.
Are there any current Western or Eastern artists that would be your contemporaries and your creative rivals, you could say, that you
Oh,
have pulled inspiration from?
I can't answer that. I don't know because in my head I'm always like, oh, I suck.
Mm-hmm.
So like I would never dare to say someone is my peer. But I guess age wise, whoever's, I don't know
Well,
who's my age that's creating right now. Inio Asano. He's way better than me,
mm-hmm.
but I think we're near the same age. But
There's
no.
there's a Roland Emerson quote that goes, "Every man that I meet is my superior in some way, and that I
Mhm.
learn from them from this."
Yeah. I think that's a healthy way to look at things.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen too many artists go bad because they think they're hot stuff. So it's like nothing ever goes wrong by reminding myself that, like, I don't know.
But
Like even as I draw, like yesterday, I was looking at one of my pages that I was drawing. I'm like, I hate this, I hate this. And then when it was 90% done, I'm like, oh, this looks good. Um, so there's never a point where I ever want to be comfortable with the way I draw. Um, I think that's the road to stagnation. And there's what's his name? Takehiko Inoue,
mm-hmm.
Vagabond, if anyone's curious. I feel like in the middle of Vagabond or towards the end, uh, he was getting stagnated, and I could tell that he wasn't challenging himself anymore. He
Mm-hmm.
tried switching to a brush at one point to challenge himself, but I could tell like he was losing his edge, and I think he just got so comfortable and bored that he just stopped working on it because he's the type of creator who always wants to be improving. I can sort of feel that based on like the themes of his stories. Um, but yeah, Kentaro Miura, I bet Berserk, for anyone who doesn't know, I feel like it's the same thing. They just get bored of their own drawings because they're drawing the same thing over and over.
Mm-hmm.
So it's healthy to put oneself in a position where you're always learning something new. So for a while, I was obsessed with learning 3D because I didn't understand how it worked. And it was a lot of fun. And it was really humbling and refreshing to teach myself. It's like, oh, I'm actually a level one at this. So I was learning from like someone 15 years younger than me who was taking a high school course in 3D. And I was like, oh man, I'm taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
They're my senpai. And it was really cool to remind myself that I'm not a master at anything.
Would you say that it's better for an artist to, shit on themselves a little bit, if not a lot, but just enough to say, "I'm good, but I could be better," rather than to go full ego and say, "Oh yes, everybody can suck me, EP. Everybody gets it."
It's, I mean, I don't mean to be like the self-immolating type.
Mm-hmm.
It's just my personality as a joke. But
Mm-hmm.
I think as long as we're always, it's like RPG terms. If you're always gaining XP, you're fine. But as soon as you start thinking like, oh, I'm at max level, I have nothing left to learn. It's like, oh, you may as well stop drawing then, because otherwise, like, you're just pirouetting on a stage expecting people to worship you, and it's to me, it's like, why are you even bothering anymore? Like, I need to be learning new techniques, or it's like, I personally can't draw just for pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if other artists. I feel like I'm an outlier in this, but I need a story. I need a reason to draw something. Like a character, they have to be having thoughts. Otherwise, I don't see the point of drawing something. Um, so I guess what I'm trying to say is it's the challenge of doing something new that's more fun for me than showing off. But that's a deeply personal thing. I don't hold anyone else to that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hope you know where I'm leading you with this question.
I'm not sure.
So, tell me about the beginning of the year. Talk to me about New Guy.
New guy. It's actually not that complex of a story. I read the comic. I saw where the meme was going.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Everybody sort of was like turning New Guy into this old new character. And then I said, "Oh, I see this opening for a joke." But it wasn't really a joke. It was kind of like a sort of hashtag relatable, like, wait a second, maybe this is what this character is, Saint New Guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the funny thing is, whatever gets viral, like that one went viral or whatever, but it's not, you can't predict what's going to be. I treated that comic strip the same way I treat or think of any other comic strip. Like, I'll get up in the morning, I shower, whatever, and then I'm like looking through Twitter, seeing what's up that day. And then if I get a comic idea based on the news or whatever's happening that day, it just so happened that day that New Guy was a thing. And I read about it, and I was like, oh, it would be funny if someone made a comic about this, and nobody did. So I'm like, oh, I'll make a comic about it. And it seemed to click with people, so that was cool.
Do you have any specific like take or judgment that you would have for the artist known as Sweet Beans 99?
I don't know. I've never spoken to them.
You
If I did, maybe, but
you've never had a personal interaction with them whatsoever?
no. I mean, maybe under a pseudonym or something. I don't think I've ever interacted with them.
When you had made your art, did you ever get any blowback about it?
Uh, well, if something goes viral, uh, chances are I'll get the occasional comment of that's critical or something.
Mm-hmm.
But
I,
those don't tend to stand out. I don't know. Maybe.
I asked because I've already done videos studying this because this is something that I regularly do. And one of the many things that I was noticing was that a lot of the people that are trying to defend the artist in question were doing so by saying, oh, everybody who made art about New Guy, it was a coordinated harassment campaign. They did it because they wanted to attack me, an artist, for my identity. And
I see.
I wanted to see from your perspective, was there anything at all that had to do anything with the artist whatsoever?
No, I actually didn't know who they were, or I later learned that the one character who was talking to New Guy was the apparent self-insert.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know this. So that's something you learn after the fact. But what I was responding to was, oh, this is something everyone's talking about. And then I investigated and I said, oh, it's sort of like whenever I'm trying to think of a comic strip idea, I try to do this as often as I can. It's like, what thing can I say that no one else is saying? And hopefully make a strip out of it that'll connect with a few people.
Mm-hmm.
So my thinking was that's where my mind went when I drew the specific comic. If anyone's wondering, it's the joke, the punchline was that basically if someone's being mean to me, then I shouldn't be mean to others because that just perpetuates it. And I should, what was it? The pain stops with me or something like that.
Yes.
It was like a tongue-in-cheek joke that's like a sad joke.
It was actually a very moving piece because it's kind of like a storybook, the way that you drew it.
Yeah.
It's very much Harry Potter-esque, if a person wanted to say. Here on my channel, I advocate, please read another fucking book. But the best case of how to compare that piece was New Guy's telling a story about how he felt. It cuts to an experience in his past where he's in pain. And it's like, no.
Yeah, like a sort of Aunt Petunia thing.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, sometimes you just write something offhand and it connects with people.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a total, it's like any other strip I draw. It's just something I did that morning. I have a lot of stories like that where it's like I kind of offhand drew a strip that I didn't really think about that much. And the audience connects with it in a way that I couldn't have engineered in a million years.
Mm-hmm.
and they just take it and do things with it that I never intended. But I think that's the nature of anything that goes viral. So the artist in question, I think it went out of their control so much that they could only assume, I guess, that it was a coordinated thing, like you said. I never heard that story, but I can see how that happens. I mean, when you're one against a million people, it's very scary. Like I did another viral comic, if you'll excuse me for the tangent,
Mm-hmm.
about a guy named Shenaniganson. And long story short was that the internet turned on him for a while and I felt bad for him.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a comic strip about that. Like, all you guys just turn on people because it's fun and you have nothing better to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt bad for him. So the comic strip idea, the joke was that you're just looking for people to target and rip apart just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
And the joke was that they did that to me. And then the next day they actually did do it to me. So that was hell. But it was interesting because it seems that this is just something that the internet likes doing. They find someone and they analyze them almost to the point where it's like you're ripping my clothes off, and it's like I don't give any of you the right to examine me this closely, just back off. But the internet has a way
Mm-hmm.
of we just want to learn everything there is to know about this person. And so anyway, it happened to Shen, it happened to this other artist who did New Guy. In a smaller way it happened to me. I won't presume that I'm as popular as them, but
Mm-hmm.
it's not a pleasant feeling. I understand. um, I don't know. It's hard to say not to take it too seriously when it's happening to you because it's really scary. But that's the internet, man.
It is yes, that is true. I also was writing down a couple notes there because I noticed that you brought up the Shen experience, and I was actually going to talk to you about that. That was the thing I was talking about.
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah.
when I did my research and I went back and looked up, there was plenty of threads that people had to offer, but none of them quite hit the same. And the short term version that a lot of them were giving me was basically you became popular on subreddit slash comics.
Yeah.
Your art basically blew up overnight, having I think it was two or three back to back posts with 23K upvotes in 2 3 days.
Yeah. The third one hit number one on like of all time on Reddit,
Mm-hmm.
and that was the one that preceded the uh, the witch hunt, I guess.
Yes.
I don't mean to sound over dramatic, but because I hit that number one spot, everyone was like, "Oh, who is this guy?" And then I made a very big mistake after that, and
Mm.
that led to me being kicked off the site, basically.
Would you like to walk me back through that?
Okay. Well, the subject matter of the comic was that I was bored one morning,
Mm-hmm.
as all these started, as all these stories begin, and I was browsing our comics, and I was like, "Oh, well, there's a lot of comics about." They're kind of simple punchlines of like, "Oh, technology." So the first comic I did as a 4-panel strip was just like, what was it? Panel one was, "Hey, computer, do the thing," and then the computer monitor said no, and the main character was like, "Grr," and the punchline was 5 million upvotes or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it was dumb. It was really dumb, and then that did really well. And the next morning, I was like, "Oh, as a follow up, I'm pissed off at Reddit for upvoting that, so I'm gonna." Basically, I escalated it of like, "How dare you guys upvote a crap comic that was a throwaway comic?" And I can't remember the punchline, but basically they upvoted that even higher,
Mm-hmm.
and I was even more pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
And the third comic was they were lifting me up to the seat as a joke. I didn't mean for this to happen.
Mm-hmm.
to They put me on the throne, or no, they're like, "Oh, we found a new champion for our comics,"
Yes.
and then they lead me to a throne, and it's Shen's dead body
Mm-hmm.
sitting on the throne. If I think it has spears like through it,
Yes.
and it was, I think, the year before that he had the bike
Mm-hmm.
the bike strip, the infamous bike strip or something like that, or a bunch of people basically treated him like crap
The
online.
stolen
And
bike
so
meme.
the joke was like, I'm sorry?
The stolen bike meme.
Yes. Which he later told me I interviewed him on my channel, and he told me actually that was not a big deal to him. But anyway, I thought it was a big deal. So the joke was that this is what you guys do to the people sitting on your throne. You like their comics, but then as soon as it's convenient to like throw spears through them, this is what the content that you really crave is. So the joke was like, oh, I'm the new champion, but oh god, that's my fate.
Mm-hmm.
And the next strip after that, my initial joke was that I'm sitting on the throne staring at a bunch of crazy people with torches. And I'm like, oh god, what do I do to entertain them? And I tried to think of what's the most mundane punchline I can think of. Oh, I know. And there was two options. One was at the time, subscribe to PewDiePie was a big meme going around
Mm-hmm.
as like a non sequitur. I could have said that. Or something even more mundane was to play the hand circle game with them.
Mm-hmm.
And my mistake was that they misinterpreted that as the OK hand symbol. And needless to say, that they misunderstood my intent with the joke, and they did not give me a chance to explain. The thread was locked, and basically, the whole internet, it felt like, decided I was something I was not, and they didn't give me a chance to explain. And I tried a few days afterwards to be like, this is exactly like the fifth strip after that was,
Mm-hmm.
you guys did exactly what I told you were going to do. So I just flipped them off, and that comic strip got like 0 upvotes.
Mm-hmm.
I pissed them all off, and they made it so that anytime I voted or anytime I posted anywhere on Reddit, it was downvoted to the point where nobody saw it. So eventually I just stopped posting on Reddit. And there's a lot I can't say or won't say, but I should,
Mm-hmm.
that like some really serious stuff happened because of that, the Reddit stuff. And long story short was I assumed my career was over. And since then, of course, I have migrated to Twitter and other things. But that was very, very unpleasant. Um, so yeah, that's the short, terrible. I'm bad at storytelling.
It's okay.
That's the short version.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I asked because that was probably one of the more interesting things because I remember seeing that.
Yeah.
I don't use Reddit. The only time I ever go there is to go specifically to one place, and that's Darkest Dungeon subreddit, because that's a game that I love beyond all existence. Excuse me.
Mhm.
The water went down weird. And when I saw that happen, I was like, that can't be the same person, can it? It is! So,
Yeah.
seeing that made me think I'd like to get up with them and find out what makes them tick. Because
Thanks,
they have
man.
been here for so long that I don't think there are people on Twitter who, if they do remember that, they were probably some of the people that said, no, you can't listen to him, he's problematic. And I'm like, I'm going to talk to him.
Thanks. It's funny because I actually have in the past made provocative strips that were intended to piss people off, but
Mhm.
nobody cared.
Mhm.
Nobody noticed. Like, let's say the way South Park does that.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it's just a strip. It's meant to be silly and dumb and haha, fart, whatever. But then when they decided, it was the post-Trump stuff probably.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of talk of the alt-right and whatnot,
Mm-hmm.
like crypto. Anyway, it's
fascists.
right. They were looking for people who were dog whistling, basically. And they had decided, because they went to my Twitter, they deep dived me on the internet, and they're like, oh, he follows X, Y, and Z on Twitter. He must be an alt-right person. They did not have any interest in talking to me or finding out. I tried a couple times in vain asking for help, and God help me, I ended up in even more trouble with some other people by asking for help. That's a whole other story. But uh, it all happened because they were not interested in actually finding out whether it was true.
Mm-hmm.
They just wanted me to be the bad guy of the week. So that was not fun. But what are you going to do? It didn't make me famous, but I think hard work and perseverance these past couple of years have helped me sort of recover a type of reputation where it's like, no, I'm actually a normal person with complex feelings, and I'm not the caricature that they made me to be. And I think most people now, like, the more they read the whole body of my work, they realize, oh, he actually is a normal person. Maybe sometimes I have a spicy joke here and there, but whatever.
Did you ever?
It's not.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go on.
Did you ever imagine that all of this would be what led you to have the career that you had?
I mean, everyone tries to be viral. Um, you try to look at trends of like I always use, maybe this is outdated now. Shen and Sarah Anderson, I think, were like the dream team of their stuff was wholesome and extremely popular.
Mm-hmm.
And they were just grassroots creators who were working at their desk at home and they just exploded with popularity. You want to look at that model and say, oh, I can do that. But most people probably can't. And I have been drawing comics on and off for what? My first graphic novel was 2003, 4. So it's been almost 20 years. And I'm still not making a living at it. Um, and I'm told my stuff is good. So I don't know what the magic formula is, but I don't think I've reached it yet. But this past year, I have been seeing more of my stuff reach bigger and bigger audiences,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think it's an accident anymore. So whatever this is, I'm just going to keep doing it and see. Maybe in a year from now, maybe I can command bigger numbers. I'm not sure,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't think I'm there yet.
Almost, but not quite.
I don't know. I'm not making a living at it, so like I keep trying to tell Shen one, I don't talk to him all the time, but like when I do, it's like, hey man, you should crowdfund a comic because you'd make so much money.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like when you have their level, I don't know if Sarah Anderson ever did it, but like, or no, Abby Howard. Do you know her?
I've heard the name, but I have not seen a lot of her work.
She was on a show called Strip Search on Penny Arcade, and she won like third place or something. But then she crowdfunded a comic for $70,000.
Mm-hmm.
Long story short is that she didn't win, but she won like the People's Choice. And Abby Howard is one of the funniest cartoonists I've ever like. I don't know. She's amazing. So once you hit a certain level of readership, I think you can convert. There's like the 10% rule. If you have 100,000 followers, you could probably expect 10,000 of them to buy your book. So there's a magic number in there somewhere where if you have a certain readership, you can convert that into a living.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I don't think I'm there yet, but it's possible that someday I might be. But I can't engineer that. I just have to see what happens.
Yes, I am familiar with that. The way that I've been explained to it, and that I had it explained to me, was that it's the 1,000 fans rule, or the 1,000 true
Okay.
fans. If you can accrue at least 1,000 true fans in your profession and field, and those people give you not specifically $100 every week, but they give you $100 a year, you will be
Sure.
set. That is something that I think any creator like $100,000 a year. Yes.
Yeah. There was a book when I was in my mid 20s called, what was it? There was a gang of guys called, well, they did a podcast called Webcomics Weekly. It was Scott Kurtz, uh, gosh, Brad Geiger. Uh, their names escape me. Forgive me.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, they did a book called How to Make Webcomics, and they said something very much like that, where it's converting your audience into true fans who will want a product that you will release every so often. Nowadays, we have stuff like Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's part of the formula that will eventually lead to artists being able to do this full time. Um, but I still think we're in the discovery phase. Um, I don't think artists nowadays, like back in the day, there was a whole argument and discussion. I don't mean to railroad us. I'm so
There's no
sorry to
problem.
talk about this
There's no
stuff.
problem.
Uh, Back in the day, the big question was, how do I get into newspapers? How do I get my strip into newspapers? So I have a current strip called Problematic, which used to be called Bite Size, which was a 4-panel comic strip in the style of Calvin and Hobbes, Peanuts, whatever. And I wanted to be in newspapers, but that was just not possible anymore because newspapers were dead.
Mm-hmm.
And now, the internet was becoming a thing. And so it's like, which third party do I have to work with to get paid to make strips? And then as I got older, it's like, wait a second, there is no third party. It's just me and my audience. And the only question is, how do I convert their interest into income? And how do I give them something that they want so that they can support me and I can give them a product that they're interested in? So now we have things like indie comics. Crowdfunding is a huge thing right now, a very flawed thing, but it's there. And PayPal, Patreon, all that stuff. So there is no iTunes for comics. There have been platforms that tried. There's like stuff like Webtoon, for instance. Um, but anyway, at the core of it is just creator and fan, and let's just exchange products for money. And I don't think third parties are mandatory anymore, and that's a good thing, I would say.
Okay, okay. And tell me about your experience with Dungeons and Dragons.
That's a complex question.
Isn't it always?
How did I start playing it?
Honestly, how did you start playing it, and then how did that inspire you to basically draw your most, I guess you could say, infamous? I wouldn't say infamous at this point, but probably your most recognized, to the point that you have people in the Eurasian Center of Art recognizing you for
That
it.
was interesting, yeah.
So start me off with how you got into Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay. Well, I've been playing RPGs, JRPGs, my whole life,
The correct choice.
and
The correct choice.
I like Western RPGs too. I like a good story too. They're more story focused instead of make your own story, which is fine. So I got into D&D because I had a bunch of friends who wanted to play, and in learning the game, I decided I'm the DM type person instead of a player because I like telling stories. So in order to be a DM, I had to like learn the whole game. So I studied it like crazy, and yeah. Long story short, is I learned D&D. I started with fourth edition, God help me, and anyway, I knew how RPGs worked, and I set up my homebrew rules and all that stuff, and I started hosting games, and then it took over my life for a while, and then I stopped. And anyway, so then I drew that comic strip. The one in question was, if I can explain it, a bunch of kids are sitting at a table playing D&D. Another character walks up to them and says, "This game is too complicated. Can we play something else or something?" And then one of the kids says, "No, this is what we're playing." You know, either basically implying either learn the rules or you can't play with us. And the punchline is, "Why are you excluding me?" Because the main character, or no, the character who comes into the strips basically saying like, why won't you do what I say? Basically is the implication. And I think that at a lot of gaming tables, whoever has been at a gaming table, everyone has the story of that person.
Yes.
So I think that's why it was relatable. And it seems that it even is relatable across the globe, and that was really cool. That was not planned. I drew the strip a year ago, and then somebody translated it into Japanese, and then it blew up over there too. So that was cool. But unfortunately, it didn't really lead to anything career-wise. So it's like I didn't like gain very many followers. So that's the funny double-edged sword of this this thing called virality. Anyway, does that answer the question? Or?
It does. It does. Because you ended up making a follow-up to that, and then that ended up causing, I guess you could call it a fire cake, being lodged at you by people who got upset about it because it hit them, because hit dogs hard.
I wonder, because I think a lot of people talk about me, but they don't like tag me in it, so I don't know what they're saying. And I think that's probably for the best.
Yes.
If it pissed off people, fine. I think what happens is that some people see themselves as the character that is the butt of the joke, and they take it personally. And then there's also people who play these games who are pissed off at that type of person, who will say, "Yes, let us now make fun of this person who we hate, who ruins the game." And so this weird perfect storm happens where everyone's pissed off at each other, and they all are pointing at the creator. It's like, honestly, I'm just making a strip that I think is funny because I've been that person and I've dealt with that person. So I made a strip that I thought was funny, and then you just kind of like a kid that you put in kindergarten. You say bye and you cry. It's like you're on your own now.
Mm-hmm.
So if they hated that strip, that's too bad. But I don't know.
It's
I,
not like it was anything that was a personal attack specifically.
no, but I have been told that there were some people who thought it was about them, which was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I how many times have I made a strip where somebody, I even someone I know, is like, "Dude, that was about me, wasn't it?" I'm like, "No," but I don't know. It's a big world. If people see themselves in the comics,
Mm-hmm.
that's their business, I guess. I don't. I don't think. Aside from political comics that I've been doing lately, I don't think I target people specifically. I don't think that's nice, and especially as you get a bigger platform, it's not cool to single out and be like, hey, all my fans, let's laugh at this one person. And the more people I gain as readers, it becomes more and more cruel, where it's like, does this target actually deserve the ridicule? And in comedy, they say there's punching up,
Mm-hmm.
basically, like never punch down, because that someone smaller than you doesn't deserve to be mocked. You always want to go after someone bigger than you. So without naming names, there's a big YouTuber right now who has an army of really mean fans who regularly get sicked on other creators and uh, fans and stuff like that. And it's just like they're using their huge platform to attack people because they can,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just cruel. It's bad. It's not funny, and I try to be funny with my strips, so it's not something I'm interested in. But there are people. Again, I won't name them, but there are people who thought that the D&D strip was about them,
Mm-hmm.
and I guess without naming names, it's like I just don't talk to those people, so I can't even clarify what I mean. So like they're not even interested in hearing my side of it,
Mm-hmm.
so I can't even talk to them. But whatever.
Now there is one in particular, and you responded to. Well, you didn't respond directly to this person. It was something that was
Yeah.
sent to you that you took a screen cap of that you made a tweet about on March the 9th. I know who this person is because this person and I have, I guess you could say, a history. The long and short of
Yeah.
it was is that they didn't know anything about comics. I schooled them on comics, and then they tried to dox me.
I hear that's a pattern with this person. Yeah.
Yes, this person. Everybody who knows who this person is, because in the video there's gonna be an image of them on screen. Everybody knows who this person's name is, but
You said it, not me.
yes, but this person is known for just basically not knowing anything about comics. She wants to be in comics because she's one of those people who wants to be in something to basically watch it die and then laugh and point at people and say, haha, I took your thing away from you. That kind of idea, that kind of mentality.
This is what I'm told. Yeah.
And what they said was, because somebody gave them a cap of your clip, and she responded saying, whoever drew this clearly has never played D&D in their life on your original. I wish everyone on earth was as excited as helpful as tabletop RPG fans, as a tabletop RPG fan who like fan goddamn, she cannot write. Tabletop RPG fan who was just offered a chance to adapt a game for a new player. One time when I was new to D&D and drawing a total blank on my characters, my DM helped me play an entire one shot as Paul Blart Maul Paladin. And your response to her was, whoa, irony is the same people who hate this person, I'm not going to say her name,
Yeah.
also hate me. She could have found out that I used to DM and made indie RPGs if she were polite enough to ask. Pro tip, if you want to make friends, be friendly.
There's a lot to unpack there.
Go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry. Was there more to the question, though? I don't want to
No,
interrupt.
I was reciting it so that you could be able to respond to it. How do you still feel about that tweet and the message of it?
It's ironic because I've had interactions with this individual in the past where we talked about the Reddit story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where basically it felt like the whole internet was after me for several weeks, and it was really scary.
Mm-hmm.
I was doxxed, I was attacked, I was, lots of scary things happened. Let me I'll leave it there. And then she, not knowing who I was, bragging about like, haha, aren't you the guy who had a meltdown on Reddit? Something like that. And I had never met her before.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, you actually have no idea what you're talking about and you're teasing me. And I guess you're just another person with a huge platform who wants to make fun of me and not give me a chance to respond. So I blocked her and I was like, well, I guess I'm just not going to talk to this person because obviously they don't want to be nice to me or they just want to dunk on people, right? So I saw it as one more cruel person who I don't want to talk to. So uh, my response, the one that you read out just now, was the irony is this individual wants to continue uh, grandstanding, saying things, assuming things like, oh, if you knew anything about RPGs, you wouldn't have made a comic like that. And there's so much I would have to say to this person that it's like I could just talk for 2 hours with them. If they were reasonable, I know for a fact that I could be polite to them. And I think I could probably in most cases, if the other person is talking to me in good faith, like we could just agree to disagree at worst. Like for instance, if their thesis is you should, as the DM, make the game easier for new players, uh, I would disagree, but I would say like I would make the game just hard enough for them to think that they're doing things, like maybe make their attacks a little more effective than if they were a regular player. Include them in the game, but kind of ease them into it, but don't go easy on them. Is would be my position, and that's like a whole 2 hour discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if it was done in good faith, this individual and I could have come to an agreement like, hey, you know what, we both live D&D, we both play it differently, but I think it's cool to just every group of people has different tastes. So I'll have friends on one hand that I would play really hardcore games with, and then I had another group that they just liked role playing, and so I went easy with combat mechanics with them, and we just had fun. And then the other group, I would intentionally try to kill them as the DM.
Mm-hmm.
So it really depends on the group. And that comic, which she misinterpreted, and she didn't give me a chance to explain because I don't think she wanted. I don't know anything about her. Maybe she didn't want to be, she didn't want clarification. Was she assumed that I don't want new people to come to the game at all?
Mm-hmm.
But if she had given me a chance to clarify, that was the point of the tweet.
Mm-hmm.
If you bothered talking to me, you would learn that I'm actually not the caricature that you think I am. And that has been the source of much frustration, uh, career wise for me for over a year now and longer, where it's like, can you just treat me like a person and then maybe we can be friends? So anyway, if people want to be jerks like this person was apparently, I just let them go. It's like I have nothing to say to
Mm-hmm.
you. I don't have time in the day. I want to make comics. I want to smile. I want to have a good day. And you go have a good day over there. So apparently she had one of her friends try to contact me and it was so stupid.
Mm-hmm.
It's like just leave me alone. If you don't want to have a conversation with the real person, just you can go pretend I'm that person over there. Just leave me alone.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm sorry I keep rambling, but
It's no
yeah,
problem. It's no problem.
it's too bad because I want to make friends, but it's like a human is a high resolution thing to download, and it takes time. And what they want is these low resolution caricatures, and I guess that's what the audience wants too.
Mm-hmm.
Because maybe if I'm being optimistic, maybe this person has gotten so used to being made fun of for so long that she has become the sort of monster she thinks she's fighting against.
It's actually
I'd be willing to grant her that if only she had talked to me. But now I don't want to talk to her anymore. So whatever.
it's actually interesting because this person in question is very similar to another person on the internet whose name I will say, and her name is Smug Roko. Not sure if you know anything about her or heard anything about her, but the long and short of it is that she kind of made too many enemies out of both people who were directly friends of her or people who worked for her. And one of the people who she happened to try to screw over was a person who basically lent her money to help the company. and she screwed that person over. And when this person when this person basically gave them an opportunity to let herself not piss them off, she decided to push the buttons and try to bully them, and they just said okay, no problem, and kind of just screwed her over in a very very hard way possible. It's an interesting viewpoint because all of the problems that exist with this person is what happens with this other person, and it's kind of like this girl, because they're both females. This girl is like the older sister of that one. It's honestly strange because I feel the same way that you do when it comes to being a DM, especially when it comes to like tabletops in general, but especially D&D. You want to give new players an opportunity to know what the actual experience feels like, and this is a viewpoint I have not just with video games in general, but also with just getting into any field. You cannot expect them to like hold your hand all of the time, but you also don't expect them to just like, okay, you walk into a dungeon, you're dead. You want to spread the cheeks, but you also want to be gentle.
It depends on the personality of the player, and everyone's so different. You have to know who you're DMing for.
Sometimes
I mean, if I had known the personality of let's say they had that disposition and they came to my table and they wanted, I mean, again, this is a caricature. It's a comic. This character in particular, like Lucy in Peanuts, is very bossy and wants everyone to do what they want to do, even if that means not playing the game. It's like, well, can you not sit with us then? Can you not interrupt? Maybe you want to watch us play for a while. It's like, no, do what I want you to do. It's like, well, don't sit at our table then. You're being a jerk. And maybe their whole life thing is that they just want the whole world to do what they want to do. And that's not what people like to do. So go away. And that's not a message people like to hear. And if someone got offended by that message, like, well, maybe think about that instead of attacking people and proving me right. Which, ironically, that's what happened with the Reddit thing. It's like, it was so strange. I wrote the climax of the next comic before it even happened, of like, the part 5 of the one of the audience setting me on fire, basically. The line that I wrote was, I'm holding up a mirror to you guys and you're breaking the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
So what they wanted to do to me was really destroy the person who showed them who they are. And I think when people get the most pissed off at me for a comic, let's say, is when I'm showing them something that's way too true.
Mm-hmm.
And people are laughing, like they're like, oh yeah, that is the way it is. And people are like, no, you've taken my mask off. I don't like that. And so they dig up, like, they try to, I don't know, they try to ruin the person who brings that message. They try to break the mirror who reveals what they really are. And that has happened to me too, but not on as large of a scale of, like, I don't know. I might pretend that I'm a nice guy online. Like, say, for instance, I drew the new guy comic, mm-hmm. where the message was like, I'm going to take the pain into myself and not spread it to others. Mm-hmm. And then someone sends me a tweet of like something I wrote a year ago where I was really mean to someone. And they're like, yeah, but you wrote this. I'm like, well, yes, I am a jerk. It's true. And what am I going to do? Except I'll try to be better, but also people are more complex than that. Mm-hmm. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, like, no one likes to be shown what they really look like, especially in front of other people. So I get that people are mad. And this profession, for want of a better word, is like comedians. The comedy circuit has the same problems, right? Where some comedians talk about how they won't even perform on college campuses because everyone gets offended, let's say. Comedy is in danger in some places because they can't tell jokes. And jokes, the comedy stage, is a place where you're allowed to just say crazy things and get a laugh, and it's cathartic. Comic strips are the same way, ideally, where, maybe I'll poke fun at myself. That's the whole point of problematic, where for instance, I'm sorry to ramble.
It's okay.
I love talking. I love telling the story. I have a character in Problematic called Francine, who's sort of the opposite of the main character, Greg. And she hates Greg because her fiance slash husband is best friends with Greg. And she wants her husband all to herself. She's very selfish. And then people will look at this character and say, why do you hate women?
Mm-hmm.
And they don't understand, or they don't want to understand. They want me to be this guy who hates women, but they completely ignore, like, for instance, that I have another female main character in the story that they don't, I guess she doesn't exist, but they want me to be this guy who hates women because I make fun of a character who is like a toxic female, let's say. But I also, the main character is this emo lord of cringe that nobody gets offended by because he's sort of me and I'm making fun of myself. And the whole point of the strip, or any strip, is to have the target of the joke is, haha, let's make fun of this person in this, or let's laugh at this person because they're silly. That's what any comic strip is. I drew a strip just a few days ago about Joe Biden being a crazy monster.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure Joe Biden or any of his followers would be offended by that.
I love
But
that piece. I love how you drew it. I love the Eldritch Abomination
was
side of it.
it was really fun to draw. But I was wondering if I was crossing the line. But but I drew him as a monster. Big deal. He eats the Bernie girl, whatever. And it was just supposed to be like this silly, like, haha, politics is funny, huh? But there always has to be a subject. The whole point of comedy in general is someone trips and falls and let's laugh. Or there's always someone that the joke has to happen to. So if we live in a world, allegedly, where everyone's equal, then everyone can be the subject of a joke then. So what are you complaining about? Is what I would say.
It's kind of getting to the point where it's like, there's the old saying of, if you can take a dick, you can take a joke, which used to be about people who could be homosexual being able to also have the ability to take a joke. It's getting to the point where it's not just if you can take a dick, it's if you have one, you can take one.
I see.
Because there's, especially with the angle of the new guy artist, Sweet Beans, with the She Who Will Not Be Named, and people like Spug Rocco, there's an entire arm, you could say, of the internet that say, no, you're not allowed to joke about those people, except those ones over there mock them incessantly all day. And it sometimes is either left or right, certain accounts that say, no, you can't joke about us, it's not acceptable, it's not allowed. And then they immediately turn around and say, no, actually, it is allowed. And also, fuck those people who don't support our way of thinking. What exactly do you have to say to those kinds of people and those kinds of companies? Especially the ones like Evil Hat and other kinds of like extroverted companies and extroverted people who put on that face for the public and then turn around and do those things.
And to confirm, Evil Hat is the Call of Cthulhu people?
Those would be the ones that said, hey, why don't you support us? We said that we said Lovecraft was racist. Don't you give us money now?
Okay. If I were to boil it down, it would be something that I might call the victim economy, where it's like there is a currency to be gained by convincing potential customers that you are a victim and that you need to be supported financially. Because let's say I had a big enough audience where my Reddit story I was able to tell a sad story to everyone. Hey guys, look what happened to me. Reddit's mean. Hey, send me some money. And if I had people who had cared about that, they would have all banded together, I'm sure, and sent me a whole bunch of money to make me feel better. And maybe that wouldn't have been a bad thing because it was real. That really did happen. And it wasn't engineered. But some people have seen that this is a thing, that there is money to be made by provoking people to attack you, making it look like you're a victim, and then looking at your followers and saying, hey, look, I'm being attacked. Send me money. It seems that once people realize that there is money to be made in this formula, I think that's when we started seeing what's his name? the Chappelle thing, Juicy Smollier.
Yes, Juicy Smollett.
Uh, and that was all the whole hoax thing. Once there are instances, many instances like that. You mentioned Evil Hat, for instance, trying to profit off the guy's name, fine, whatever, and saying he was a bad person. That's a whole other discussion, I suppose. But political correctness on, let's stay on the left side of the spectrum, is like, hey, look how much we are a part of your team. Be sure to send us money. And on the right side of it is like, look how much I'm being attacked by those libtards. Send me money. And I see a lot of snake oil salesmen drumming up drama that didn't exist before, making themselves look like victims, and then saying, hey, I'm going to cash out now. I have a comic for sale. Please buy it, and I'll send you this crappy comic. There's a lot. I don't want to name names, but that's a thing that's been going on lately.
I'm pretty sure everybody's seen it.
Yeah, that's a weird unspoken thing. Like, people are too scared to talk about it still, but because it's still going on. But long story short, there is money to be made by making yourself look like a victim. And where there are people who actually were bullied, who actually need help, like Target Tori. She was like the target of someone actually tried to make fun of her. And then everyone's like, no, screw that guy who made fun of you. We're going to send you to Hawaii.
Not even.
And then she's like, yeah.
Not even just that. The person's name in question was David Levitt, who is notorious. Okay. He is notorious for being a male Karen, because that is the thing that he did. Too many examples of him in the past that he didn't even have the gumption to erase, where he did that to other people. His entire thing was that, I'm going to try to abuse the law and get, what even was the price of that? An electric toothbrush for $70,
maybe $20
or something. I'm not sure exactly how much it was, but he tried to get this merchandise that would have cost him like maybe $50 at most. Try to get it for a penny off, because the display price was what he claimed was the actual price. And you see examples like that, and then you see examples like Sweet Bean, and then you see examples like She Who Will Not Be Named, and then you see examples like Smug Rocco. And I'm like, did we go back 6 years? Is this the Goober Gay? Are we here again?
When it becomes profitable, any sort of like real, let's say even an art movement, if it's real, I don't know. All these weirdos come out of nowhere and they're like, hey, I'm a victim too. Send me money. And I've seen in cases with like comics, because that's my thing. I'm sure there are other examples where it's like, I don't even make a good comic, but hey, give me money anyway, because hey, look, this one guy was mean to me this one time. And it's like, are you actually? And then I see the audience, they're actually buying it. And then what's even stranger is when you call it out, you get called names and bullied and doxxed and all kinds of nasty things. It's like, wait a second. It's like the inmates taking over the asylum. All these snake oil salesmen have come in. She Who cannot be named. I don't know if she's an example, but let's just say like all these people who are fakers come in and take over the industry. And then the people who are actually in need, who are actually being made fun of, or their lives are actually being ruined, they just kind of vanish. It's like the loudest people get noticed, but the people who actually need help, there's no money for them, there's no support for them, because we can't tell what's real and what's fake anymore when it comes to victimhood or whatever that is. But it's just so sick that there is such, again, I called it the victim economy. There is so much profit to be made by being attacked, and most people can't tell the difference. Like, for instance, there was a kid who had like dwarfism or something in Australia, was it?
I can't remember the kid's name, but I remember what you're talking about.
The crying kid, yeah. And I actually drew a comic strip about the little punk who, it turns out, it was a hoax or something, allegedly. And I felt sorry for him before I found out. And then apparently there was video footage of him like making it rain with $100 bills or something, and they got all this money. and nobody talked about it afterwards. But it's like, wait, I can't tell the difference between actual victimization because I really felt bad for that kid, like really bad. And I was I was so moved. I made a comic strip about it, like how we shouldn't be mean to people, basically. And I was tricked. And how often is that happening versus when is it actually happening where you see a guy getting beat up on the sidewalk
Mm-hmm.
and now it's like, is this staged? Should I help them? I don't
There
know.
was an exact video like that. It was a group of men, because I remember reporting on this. It was a group of men that walked up to a man and they just beat the shit out of him and then started robbing his pockets on the video. And it's like, all right. And this is right after they suspended in the Philadelphia area, I think it was, that the police officers would not be responding to anything with crime. No
Okay.
response to shoplifting, no response to home invasions, any of that. It was basically, oh, so we're actually out here now. Okay,
Hmm.
let me just get this stick and this gun. I'm just gonna stay
Yeah.
inside now. And it's really interesting because this is happening not just in like D&D and shit. This is happening everywhere. It happens in film, it happens in TV, and it's most especially happening in comics. That's not even to mention
Hmm.
Comics Gate. How do you even feel about Marvel or DC, the big two, or individual indie comics?
Uh, well, I don't really read a lot of American
Mm.
stuff, but I am painfully aware of what's been going on with the industry versus indie
Mm-hmm.
comics. I have been involved in it, unfortunately, and I don't know how much you want to get into it. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, I'm very much aware of it, and I got in how do I put this? I got into too many fights with too many people because I realized that something messed up was going on, and I walked out on all of it. Maybe there was money to be made, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, but I realized that something really creepy and gross has been happening that I'm not even sure is wise to talk about yet. Um, but yeah, it's again the victim economy. There is a lot of money to be made in people making it look like they're under attack, and there is no way to prove anymore that they are or are not. So I think most customers are now sick of the uh, it's sort of a game. It's like, hey, how often can this person be under attack? How many times are we going to help
Mm-hmm.
them? Um, and why aren't these comics shipping on time, for instance? Why are there so many instances of fans and creators fighting online? Why are people picking fights with each other? Because, for instance, and again, I call this drama
Mm-hmm.
marketing. Um, I'll pick a fight with you because then it turns into like a blood sport thing so that we both plug our projects at the end of it and whoever likes us can back our
Mm-hmm.
projects. And it's like whoever's the loudest person wins, not whose comic is the best. Or I don't know. It's just this like let's keep manufacturing these crises, and that's what unfortunately. Like it's gotten so bad that I'm even hesitant to say it, but I think that's what Comicsgate has turned into,
I agree.
and
I agree.
it's really sick. I don't even know how much I want to get into it, but I'm not on good terms with those people at all. And I, for a while, I was sure that I was exactly the kind of creator they were looking for, especially post the Reddit thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hey, I was actually bullied. Do you guys want to be friends with me? And then some shady dudes are like, hey, man, listen, I got to tell you about this thing. They're like, all this shady stuff going on. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. I just want to make
Mm-hmm.
comics. So it is not, Comicsgate is not what they say it is. And there was a point in the history, I'm sure there will be documentaries about
Mm-hmm.
it. Something changed. And anyway, I won't say too much right now, but something changed and it got warped into the victim economy. And they turned into the exact thing that they are criticizing.
Mm-hmm.
And history will show who the bad guys were and who the good guys were. I think people are wising up, but we're still watching it unfold. It's really creepy. But anyway, I won't get into it too much.
Uh, basically my whole entire thing with it is because basically I see everything, and it's like being a judge, like a literal Judge Dredd. There's so much shit, and I can only react to 3% of what happens, and I tend to
Yeah.
stick to the things that I find as hobbies, because I'm one of what you would call a toku nigga. I'm out there. I see things. I see films. I watch them. I review them. I talk about them with my friends. We shit post about them, and then we have group nights where we just go over the things of history and past. It's something that my Discord asked for recently, and the whole thing with Comicsgate I feel is like a repeat of what we went through with Sylvie Quinn, real name Chelsea Van Valkenburg. Her
Ah, you've heard about that then.
Yes, it's like you sit down and you look at the history of all of how we've come to now with something like Comicsgate. And I was there in the beginning because I remember the exact day that DC Pro for Green Lantern book, a book that I would love because of the work of somebody like Ethan Van Sciver, Moose Bauman, says to my face, and I quote, "If you don't like the way I'm treating you, go fucking send a tweet to DC about it." And I did that. And then he responds with, "You thought something was gonna happen. I've given you, I've let you gone on for enough. It's time for me to cut this off." And I'm like, so you just lost all 300 of my dollars buying those books. Let me take that shit back real quick. And
Someday we're going to learn the depth of that story. I don't think we're there yet.
it's a whole thing, but it's everybody has a story like that. They remember the exact moment that they got shit on or insulted or intimidated or antagonized by a creator that's in either side of the business or is an individual that was in that movement, and then they remember that moment where hashtag move the needle happened. It's like, hey guys, just post books that you buy, and it's like, oh okay, yeah, I like these books and I like these books and I like these books, and then somewhere along the way, it's I think it's right after even Fan Scaver's like, or it's probably right when he released his Cyberfrog, the first one of it, I think was Blood Honey, before he had the follow up with a whole bunch of them, and then Richard Meyer printing out Jawbreakers, Lost Souls, and then all of the other artists and all the other people started coming together like, yeah, let's have ourselves a buyer's revolt. Let's make Comicsgate happen. And it's like, I know where this is going. I just let me sit on the sideline. And then the fractioning happening. It's like, yup, yup,
Yeah.
yup.
We've seen it before. If, Gamergate was similar enough. It became profitable to keep the fight going, even though you clearly. Can I curse?
It is. It is.
I'm sorry, I won't curse. Even though they clearly won and it's over, they keep the fighting going because it's profitable. And I think what happens with any kind of movement is that people with personality disorders, and that's not my medical opinion, that's just my opinion, are very magnetic in the same way like a cult leader might be. And people just who don't have a lot of integrity, or they don't think for themselves very much, they just like, oh hey, here's this really strong personality, let's just flock behind them and believe everything they say.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get enough of those people together, you can create a community, and then you can make the community bigger by making it look like you have a big, anyway. But that's what happened, and it seems that uh, they are keeping up the facade that there's like an anti-movement against them, when actually it's just like people saying, hey, you're a jerk, and hey everyone, let's not believe everything they say, and maybe you should all realize that they're jerks. And they're like, you're clearly conspiring against
Mm-hmm.
us. uh, but that's convenient for their narrative. I'm being attacked not because I'm a jerk, but because I'm doing too well and everyone's jealous of me.
It's not me, it's the
um,
children.
there's so many, again, personality
Mm-hmm.
disorders, but it's so sad. And as a creator, it's like, man, 2 years ago it looked like that was such a great movement, and we've all learned a lot of lessons, and I think it's not over yet. I think it's going to end with legal battles, but we don't know how that's going to what the outcome is going to be. But anyway, the positive end of that story is that a lot of creators realized that all you have to do to crowdfund a comic is to have a good audience that likes your stuff, uh, use social media in a positive way, have interactions with your audience, um, and maybe the downside of that is don't have too many arbitrary
Mm-hmm.
fights. Don't pick fights. And if you can get out of a fight, don't engage in one, because it doesn't look good to keep a fight going for no reason. And I've seen people on that side of the fence try to start and perpetuate fights just to end up plugging their stuff at the end of the fight. It's like, oh, you actually weren't fighting. Everyone has been taken for a ride. And I don't like, I don't know. I don't believe I've ever tried to sell a book doing that. And I wouldn't want someone to buy a book of mine doing that. I like to believe that my books are worth reading and I don't have to do a trick to make someone get it. But that's because I'm an actual creator. And I think a lot of fakers have infiltrated these. I'm talking about any community, D&D, whatever. There's a lot of infiltrators who do not have talent, who just kind of insert themselves into the conversation. And if you look at their work versus an actual professional or someone who's really good at what they do, you can just side by side, you could tell the difference. But unfortunately, it seems that these fakers find a way into these industries, into high positions, so that they can decide who gets in and who doesn't. And that happened with CG. It happened with other organizations. And I guess it's just a life lesson for us all. It will happen anywhere, and we just have to be ready for it. And not in a mean way, but just like expect these people to be anywhere and be ready to counter them.
Gatekeep. Just gatekeep your fucking hobbies, everybody.
I hate to say it, but yeah, if there's a jerk who's going to ruin the whole game, don't let them in. That's all there is to it. I want to include everyone, but I see people with personality disorders. Like I had one D&D game where I had a player trying, like he was accusing me of railroading the game because he kept trying to break up the party. And they were in a town shopping, and he's like, oh, I go off running into the wilderness for his turn. I'm like, okay. And he kept trying to break the game just to see what I would do. And so I didn't invite him back. It's like, I don't know what you're trying to do. You're trying to make this game about you instead of let's all just have fun together. Those kinds of people, depending on the size of the group, like it's just you're not gelling well with us, so please kindly go do something else. Or we'll leave the table, which was the punchline of the second RPG comic. Like I'll leave the table, and then I'll if there's ever a follow-up, basically that's what it'll be. Like I make another table and then everyone else comes to that table, something like that. Sorry to ramble.
Of course, it's always okay. It's honestly, especially with how much I see, because every other day I usually see these kinds of instances of it happening in whatever hobby or whatever industry it happens in. It always tends to be the people who are most often doing and facilitating that exact reaction, or the ones that will turn around and say, "Oh, but we're always acceptable. It's always allowed." It's always an asterisk there, and it's always that except those cishet patriarchal males, and or
as long as you do what I say, you can sit at my table. It's like Game of Thrones. I'm gonna kick you off the throne and sit there, and it's the same thing all over again, just a different person. But way worse, like actual tyranny. I don't know, man. I've seen it happen at D&D tables. I've seen it happen in comics communities. When there is a giant prize to be won, people will backstab. They'll do all kinds of creepy stuff like dox and look up personal stuff. I don't even want to get into it. It's disgusting. But like when there's money to be made, they will do anything to silence critics. And people even within the organization who are like, hey, I'm blowing the whistle on you, and they have an accident, quote unquote. They get Hillaried. I hate to say it that way, but yeah, it's like a weird Game of Thrones thing, and it's just for a few bucks and some clout. So my solution is whatever. I'm independent. I know a few people online. I have decent relationships with a few of them. Fine. I make comics, and maybe I'm just gonna keep my distance for a little while. That's as far as I can. I don't know. Every time I get too close to people online, I feel like something weird happens. Like I don't know. Maybe the internet was a mistake. Is what I'm
Sometimes.
saying. I'm just kidding.
Sometimes. I think that all the time.
Just kidding.
See,
No, I don't mean that. But yeah, it's weird, and we're all just trying to figure it out. The internet's still so young. But yeah, it's comics. That's our passion. Or that's my passion, at least. And man, I'd love to do it for a living, but uh, I don't know how to navigate this boat. I'm just kind of going along with the waves and seeing what happens. And if I have to work as a delivery man for pizza, that's what I'll do. Uh, but that's, I'm still going to make comics. I like doing it. So that's where I am right now in my career. Anyway.
that is delightful to hear.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else that you'd like to tell me?
Like to talk about, aside from thanking you for inviting me. I guess if anyone wants to follow my stuff, they could follow me on Twitter. And I got a book coming out next week, maybe, or the week after. And it's probably going to be decent, so you could check that out. That's it.
It is a pleasure been having you here, George.
Yeah, man. I was really. You had me a little worried at the beginning of the conversation. I didn't know what surprise you had for me.
No,
But I had a lot of fun, honestly. Thanks for inviting
if
me.
anything, it's my job to just tickle his pee-pee just a little bit. Just a little bit.
You have permission now. You're very gentle.
Next time I'll lift my hand and just grab it, okay?
Oh boy, that sounds fun. Anytime though, it was fun.
Of course. And I'll make sure to have your information linked in the description bar below, so that if anybody wants to go check that out, you can go find that. Again, name is George Prime, JPrime85. Find him on Twitter. Find him on Instagram. Find him on. Do you have a YouTube? Because I don't know if you have a YouTube.
I do. I think it's just my name, George Alexopoulos. But if people look at my Twitter, it's linked in my Twitter.
No problem. No problem. So again, thank you for allowing me to conduct this interesting interview. It has been a pleasure.
It was my pleasure.
I hope you have a good day. Okay.
Yeah. You too, man. Thank you.
Rono Chan, clap cheeks.
I will. Be sure not to.
Okay. Right. Thank you, sir.